Today, we're heading into a museum. But this isn't your typical museum. The exhibits here, they're ghosts, lurking in the code of a video game. We're going to explore a player-run archive, one that's kept a record of 2 decades of forgotten history, lost features, and some truly spectacular, unfulfilled ambitions in a game called Entropia Universe. So, this quote, it's basically the mission statement for a blog called Content of Oblivion. And man, it just perfectly sums up what we're talking about today. Think of this blog as a living monument, a tribute to the lost potential of this really unique MMO, Entropia Universe. And it's going to be our guide through this whole wild story. All right, so before we really tour this museum of broken promises, we got to set the stage. We need to understand the world these promises were made in and get to know the dedicated player who decided, nope, we're not letting any of this be forgotten. Okay, this is the one thing you absolutely have to get. In Entropia Universe, the game's currency is directly tied to the US dollar. We're not talking about some player-run auction house here. This is a fixed 10-to-1 exchange rate. And what that means is that every single broken promise, every abandoned feature we're going to look at, it didn't just cost players their time. It could, and often did, cost them real, actual money. And the person behind this blog, a player named McCormick, they're not just some random person complaining on a forum. No, they're more like a digital archaeologist. They're literally digging through old game code, developer statements, and forgotten marketing materials to piece together this hidden history. So yeah, this isn't just a long list of complaints. It's a carefully curated museum of what could have been. Okay, let's step into our first exhibit. We're going to see how the ghosts of these abandoned ideas are still haunting the game files, years and years after they were supposed to be a real thing. Think back to 2005. Players were being sold this classic MMO dream. You're going to tame the wild creatures of this alien planet and ride your very own Atrox into the sunset. I mean, the marketing was amazing, but the reality, well, that turned out to be a very different story. And this timeline, it just perfectly charts the slow, painful death of that promise. It wasn't like they just ripped the Band-Aid off. No, it was this slow fade to black that stretched out over almost a decade. It was filled with these little hints and hopes that it might come back, but then a developer comes out and confirms, yeah, the whole system only exists on paper. Basically, there was nothing there. And this quote from the blog really gets to the heart of it all, doesn't it? It's about the long, patient, and usually fruitless wait of a really dedicated community, just hoping the developers will finally deliver on these huge visions. You know, taming wasn't a one-off thing, not even close. Players started divvying around and found all the pieces for a whole new cooking profession. We're talking item icons for stuff like spare ribs and chicken legs, 3D models for a field kitchen, even a cooking skill icon, all of it just sitting there in the game folders collecting digital dust. And a developer even confirmed the plan back in 2008. But just like taming, it just vanished, went to oblivion. But okay. The ambition didn't stop with just a few missing features. Oh no. The developers and their partners, they were dreaming way, way bigger. Now we're talking about entire planets, major brand partnerships that were announced with massive fanfare, and then just, poof, gone without a trace. I mean, the scale of this stuff is just staggering. Seriously, just try to imagine this. Entire planets built around Michael Jackson, a Universal Monsters planet where you could hunt Dracula. They even had partnerships in the works with NASA and the European Space Agency. Each one of these was a completely different direction the game could have gone, and none of them ever happened. So, what happened? This wasn't just a case of developers changing their minds. The whole collapse of these huge plans was tied to a massive, real-world business deal that went south. A company called C Virtual Worlds agreed to buy the game's main planet, Calypso, for $6 million. The problem? They made the first payment and then defaulted on the rest. And when that deal fell apart, it took all those amazing promises right down with it. And remember what we said at the beginning, that real cash economy? Well, because of that, these abandoned projects weren't just simple disappointments. They often spiraled into real financial controversies, causing big losses for both the company and, more importantly, its players. Okay, this might be the wildest plan of them all. Get this. The game's developer, MindArc, actually got a legitimate real-world banking license in Sweden. Their goal was to operate something called MindBank as an actual functioning bank. The whole thing fell apart when they just couldn't raise the 5 million euros in capital that they legally needed to get it off the ground. Just, wow. All right, let's jump forward to 2017. Mindark decides to get into the crypto game with a project they call Deep Token. And they made a very specific promise to their community, a level playing field. They said no special deals, no airdrops of free tokens, because that stuff devalues the investment of the people who supported us from the start. But you can probably guess what happened next. When the token sales started to struggle, what did they do? They broke that exact promise. In what looks like a last-ditch effort, they launched an airdrop, just giving away free tokens. This was a direct contradiction of what they'd promised, and it created a huge firestorm with the very investors they were trying to win over. So this whole saga finally came to an end about a year later. The project was completely canceled, and everyone got their money back. It was just another really stark lesson in how messy and high-stakes things can get when you try to blur the lines between a virtual world and real-world finance. So, okay, we've just taken a journey through this graveyard of digital dreams. What's the big takeaway from this really unique slice of internet history? For me, this content of Oblivion blog is more than just a list of complaints. It's powerful proof that we're seeing a new kind of historian emerge, the player. Think about it. We're in an age of live service games that are always changing, or sometimes just shutting down completely. And it's often the players, the community, who step up to become the archivists. They're the ones making sure that the complex, messy, and honestly fascinating history of these digital worlds doesn't just get erased. And that's what this blog really leaves us with, a big, provocative question for our modern digital age. In a world like this, what happens when the promises are forgotten, but the code itself remembers? The answer, it seems, is that this history becomes a permanent record, preserved not by the people who made the game, but by the players who lived it and simply refused to let it fade away.